institutional investors now are holding, who hold $11 trillion in assets, have divested from fossil fuels right now. And by comparison, if you just go back to 2014, the holdings of investors who were made the same divestment commitment was 52 billion. So, this is, 11 trillion, that's by one estimate, 16% of total global equity markets. It's a big number. Financially, for the people making this commitment, it's probably a dumb move. Just generally, any active investing strategy is likely to be a loser, but particularly if it's not even attempting to outdo the market, it's just saying that we don't like fossil fuels, so we're not going to invest in them. For example, so the University of California last week said that its $13.4 billion endowment will sell all fossil fuel assets by the end of September, and that its $70 billion pension fund will do the same. And now they're pretending that it's all about reducing financial risk. So the Wall Street Journal notes that writing in the Los Angeles Times, the university system's chief investment officer and treasurer, Jagdeep Singh Bhakhar, and board regents chairman Richard Sherman insisted that, quote, hanging on to fossil fuel assets is a financial risk, and that such investments, quote, posed a long-term risk to generating strong returns for UC's diversified portfolios. And the Wall Street Journal goes on to point out that they quote one consulting firm that while green tech advocates may be able to cherry pick individual years when green energy has outperformed fossil fuels, the long view shows the opposite. And so the organization that they're quoting did a study that found between 2008 and 2018, fossil fuel investments delivered an annual average return of 2.6%, and the green energy funds yielded minus 3.94%. And I've seen other studies that reach similar conclusions, when they look backwards at sort of what would have happened if pension funds had divested. They would have inevitably lost a lot of money for pensioners. And Bill Gates actually chimed in on the divestment debate recently, where he was quoted as saying that divestment to date probably has reduced about 0 tons of emissions. It's not like you've capital starved the people making steel and gasoline, he said. I don't know the mechanism of action where divestment keeps emissions from going up every year. I'm just too damn numeric, which is great. But then the Financial Times, which quoted him, went on to say that activists said arguments against fossil fuel divestment miss a larger point. The idea is not to starve companies of capital, but to remove their social license to operate and make it easier for governments to act on climate issues by breaking the fossil fuel companies' hold on politicians. Well, that, first of all, if you're California pension or UC, University of California pension, or New York public pension, you have no business doing that. And even as an individual, you certainly have the freedom to do that. But that is completely immoral to, quote, remove the social license of fossil fuel companies to operate. That is literally like boycotting an agency that's making the best medicine for fighting cancer or HIV or something like that. You're fighting the people who are providing the energy that people need to live. And if you're trying to remove their social license and anything else that makes it harder to operate, that is really despicable. Like, even if you had the view that, okay, well, we do have to transition away from fossil fuels, this idea of vilifying them versus, through divesting from them, like, no, it would be much more your attitude of, like, if, Blockbuster gets out-competed, you say, all right, well, I'm going to sell my Blockbuster. But, in the case of fossil fuels, if we had to divest, if we transition away from them because they were being, like, banned or something, like, that's a sad, tragic thing, not something to be celebrated and gloated about. And so, it's not clear what the divestment movement is actually accomplishing, except that they certainly are getting more people on board. And, I think if your money is wrapped up in one of these divesting organizations, I think it's something, it's certainly something I would be concerned about. Steffen, any thoughts?
Yeah, it's sort of the opposite of the right approach. So as Bill Gates said, it's so in the interview, Bill Gates said a little more about, I'm investing in something like nuclear technology and so on to actually find a viable alternative, and then we can do that. And I think this is a crucial part here, where you can divest all you want, even if you could somehow financially hurt these companies. We need them. They are the basis of our economy, and there is no viable replacement, at least not in the short term. And so let's assume we would find something like making nuclear more viable that could actually replace a lot of fossil fuels and outcompete them economically. Then that would have to happen first. You can't just say, oh, we'll just drop the capital on fossil fuels before we have built the nuclear reactors to replace them. That's a totally immoral and nonsensical approach. But of course, they use this as sort of a propaganda tool to, as they say, revoke the social license to operate. So they want to demonize fossil fuels long before we have something to replace them with. And that's a really, really anti-energy and ultimately anti-human policy.